This is a Testimonies with Terry follow-up.
All right, everyone. Well, I am here with season 3 guest, the tattooed pastor, George Wood. George, so good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on the show and being willing to catch up with me.
Yeah, man. It is it's really cool to be, we were catching up a little bit before we hit record and yeah, man, it's just really great to be here and to think of just I think this life of following Jesus, it's sort of pretty exciting and it's sad that so many people miss that because it really is. And just thinking about where I was last time we spoke a little bit over a year ago, I guess, and just where my life is at now and just all the miracles that have happened in between. So it's just really cool to be here. And I second that, man, just to catch up.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm excited to talk about a lot of those changes that you've been through in the last year and the miracles that God has done. But one thing that I've come to learn about you, George, over the last year is that we have a little bit of a tie to Minnesota because your son River actually plays football for Gustavus Adolphus here in Minnesota. And so, man, I'm assuming the season has just recently started for River at the time of this recording. How's things going for him there?
Yeah, and it and honestly, that is one of the biggest ways that the Lord has really shown me His amazing grace and power and love and everything that we've come to expect in a heavenly Father has really been this way that I lost my son when I was in my addiction, and then the way that God rebuilt my life and around, and River was sort of the centerpiece of that, where it was like, God, keep me sober for my son, help me to be a father that is worthy of him, and to be present, and all of those types of things. And over the years, to be praying and interceding for him and his love for football, and he's not a big kid, okay, so he's not like it's a given he's going to go start somewhere at a D1 college. He's my size, but he's really good. And so just praying over him through years, and God, please make this happen for him. And to like finally see him, because of his, he's got good grades and he's able to stay on the right path, as so many of today's kids don't, and make it to play football in, of all places, Minnesota. But he starts that journey during COVID, and just the struggle of being in Minnesota in winter during COVID, and you can't even leave your room. And he had to oversee all this adversity, and praying for God to really keep him, and to see now he's a senior, and he's basically starting on the team. And they played one game so far this year. He had a little bit of a rough start, but he'll get it together. This weekend's their second game, and he's doing the deal. Is the way I look at it is like life is just a bunch of challenges for all of us, and you just got to stay faithful and true to the things you're called to do, and no matter what season of life you're in. And he's doing that, and I'm so proud of him for doing that, because it hasn't been easy, but he's up there, and he's ready for the season to roll on.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And I love that you spoke about the restoration that has happened between you and him and that relationship, coming out of your addiction and now being able to play an active part of his life, be present in his life. That's so beautiful, man. And yeah, you're in Florida and now your son's in Minnesota. You mentioned the winters. Has he acclimated to the cold weather here yet at all? Has he gotten used to the winters at all?
Let me just tell you this. One of the most amazing miracles is I'm not a single time has he complained about the weather. He just taken to it. It does not bother him. When we went on that, we came up his senior year of high school to visit Minnesota, and we came up in the first week of January, and it was -5 degrees the entire week we were there. So he knew what he was getting into. Every team that he interviewed with basically warned him, like, the winters are brutal. You have to somehow, figure out to get some sunlight. Otherwise, you're going to go into seasonal depression. Anyway, He just taken to it. I'm from upstate New York originally, so I don't know if there's any truth to this, but maybe it's in his blood. But he's definitely The winters don't bother him. The cold doesn't bother him at all.
Wow. That,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a miracle in my mind because I'm born and raised in Minnesota and I despise the winters. My body's not used to them. So good for him for just taking it on.
I live in Florida, and I honestly despise it here. I do not like the
Oh, really?
weather at all. Oh yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, Florida, the weather." I go, "I hate." It's the thing I hate the most about Florida is the weather. It's just you have no
Wow.
idea. It's hot. You walk outside, you're walking into like a sauna every single day. I mean, it's I sweat a lot anyways. It's brutal, man. It's brutal. I don't even care about the hurricanes. I care about like nonstop hot all the time. No
Yep.
seasons, just
Yeah.
hot and miserable. You get
Right.
maybe 20 days of weather under 70. After that, it's all over 90. It's miserable, man. I don't know why people come
That
here.
that's pretty brutal. There's I think it's maybe unique to Minnesota or the Midwest, but it's not so much
Yeah.
the heat, it's that gosh darn humidity, right? And Florida, I've only been there once, but I've heard some horror stories about the humidity that
Yeah.
you guys get down there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's ruthless.
Well, man, let's go back to last year. So you were on the show. It was either September or October of last year as part of season 3. The Uncovery that you and Brit Eaton authored had just recently come out, and so let's talk about that, man. It's been out for a year now, the Uncovery, and talk about how has that book changed your life in the last year, and what kind of impact have you seen that book made in the culture and in the community of mental health, addiction, suicide, trauma since then?
Yeah. Whew, let me just say, it has been a learning experience how both the enemy works, about how the cracks in our own personal foundation when we don't take personal care serious will shine through. How if we don't listen to the small still voice of the Lord when he's speaking, and we do things even though we think they're good things, and maybe they are good things on the surface, but it's possibly not what the Lord is calling us to, that eventually his grace is removed. And when his grace is removed and you're doing something that's totally sustained by his strength and his will, you will crumble under the pressure. And my personal discovery over the last year has been one of God had called me to change ministries years before, and I didn't, because I felt like I needed to continue, saving lives and working with men and doing what I was doing with the Timothy Initiative, the ministry I had started in 2009 and ran faithfully up until last year. But God had called me years prior to step away and to go into the next phase of my life, which was more about the Sober Truth Project, working with people more from a leadership perspective on a bigger scale rather than a drug program where I worked with 40 men living in 4 houses. And even though I was doing life with them and continue to do life with them, but it was more focused centrally on that 40 people. God had been calling me for years to step out and tell the world what he had done, and the way that he had the way that he had revealed the secret to addiction and mental health being connection, being community, authentic, true community, the real gospel of Jesus Christ, being lived out authentically among people is the secret to defeating addiction and mental health problems and overcoming trauma and building a society where we don't have as much trauma and addiction and mental health, right? But I didn't listen, because often we feel like, oh no, the mission in front of me is too critical, I got to keep doing this, or it's not time to step away. Well, when the Uncovery came out, a few months before the book was released, July 26th, my life started to, unravel. And I don't mean in personal failure or sin or things like that. I just mean you're running an organization that is being sustained by a $350,000 a year budget. You have, your staff that is all people in recovery. You have the men that are in the houses that are, brand new to hopefully finding recovery. I mean, that type of stuff just started to unravel, where I had a board of directors that was brand new, and they wanted to go in one direction, and I was called to a different. It was just all of these things. And then this amazing book comes along, and the enemy just saw that as a time to step in and wreak havoc. And he did. And he wreaked havoc on my life. It should have been this joyous time of releasing this amazing book to the world. And it was one of the worst seasons of ministry I've ever been through. And I understand that you don't do what I've done for as long as I've done and not understand the nature of spiritual attacks. Obviously, I understand. I know Satan pretty well, probably as well as anyone listening to this podcast. I've battled the devil face to face for many, many years. So I get all that, but it was just ruthless. And attacks that, there's just certain attacks that, it's really difficult to overcome when it's, stability related. So your financial stability, the infrastructure of the thing you work for, you're in charge of all of these different aspects of it, and that cracks. And so it was like all of these things that like you just can't overcome with a couple good prayers of rebuking Satan. Although I kept doing them regularly, but that just wasn't enough. It was just like this. It was more of a like, okay, this whole house has to come down, and we need to start again. And so I ended up officially stepping away from, my last day with the ministry was October 3rd of last year. And then I went into a personal sabbatical for many months, many, many months where I, which is a whole other podcast. Let's just say that. But, the book continued on, and the testimonies of people that have read the book and the way that it has transformed their lives are, I don't mean this in a prideful way, but it was everything that I had expected, because I knew God had told me that that's what he was going to do. And I know that he's going to continue to do that. And it's something to be said about wanting to force the book into everyone's hands, or just saying, okay, God, it's all you. And you put it into the hands of the people that need it the most, and the people that you want to have it. And I needed to recognize, okay, I'm trying to get it into everyone's hands. And that's part of the problem, because I'm not called to do that. So God, you do that. And so the Lord really, took that and ran with it. And it's been amazing seeing people come forward, especially when they're fellow counselors like yourself, people that are, do this for a living and that are educated. And there's those that are in recovery, and they're like, wow, I've always searched for something like this. But it's something else when it's your peers that are, also in the professional counseling field, and they're like, this is powerful. I've never heard this before, but I get it. This works. And so that's been the thing that's really impacted me on a personal level, because, it affirms me as a man. It affirms me as a counselor, as a pastoral caregiver, and to hear other, counselors say, yes, this is right, this works. And so I, having those conversations and amazing things where men in prisons across the United States somehow end up with this book in their hand and are reaching out to me, and they're like, got your book. I don't even know where I got it, and I just want to tell you, this has been my life story. And so it's really been just exciting. Well, let me rephrase that. It's been a journey. It is exciting. It's been hard, because a lot of those months I was in that full-on battle with the devil himself and myself, personal, like it says in the book of James, that if we say we're called away, we're tempted by the devil. No, we're tempted by our own flesh, and our own flesh is what gives birth to sin that gives death. So wake up. Sometimes it's your own flesh. And I had a little bit of the devil, Beelzebub, whatever you want to call him, and then self. And both were like at odds. And I needed to step away and reconnect with the presence of God and the purpose of God for my life, and resting in that purpose of God and presence of God, so that I could, finally defeat, both my flesh and the devil at the same time. So that part of the journey has been a challenge, but at the same time, life-giving and exciting to see what God has done so far, and thrilling to be waiting to see what he's going to do next.
Amen, man. Man, I love that. Thank you for being so candid and opening up about, I mean, like you said, man, what should have been one of the most joyous seasons of your life with the release of the Uncovery turning into a very hellish and chaotic season of
Yeah.
your life. And, one thing that stands out to me is that it sounds like, at that time, God had given you a word. He had spoken to you as far as like what he was wanting you to do. But you said that, hey, I just kind of felt, the mission was still in front of me that I'm on. I got to see it out. I got to continue on. And it sounds like that there was maybe like a hint of feeling like kind of, I got to take on the weight of the world here. Like I gotta be the one to help these people. I gotta be the one to get this book in people's hands, kind of focusing on your own works and your own efforts instead of just kind of, submitting that over and just letting God do his thing. What has that been like for you, George, over this last year of learning to just submit to the Lord, and I guess even beyond that, to just trust the Lord with things that, maybe you feel like, oh, if I could just do this in my own power, like I know for sure I could do this, but God, I'm going to step back, I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to just trust you to do it. What's that been like to kind of make that transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Completely freeing. I think those of us that have been through addiction all want freedom from, the bondage that has traumatized us for so long. And so we step away from our hardcore heroin addiction, alcoholism, sex addiction, fill in the blank addiction, and then go into more commonly accepted addictions, such as, power or authority, or impressing people, or stability of some sort. So we substitute one for the other, because majority of the people listening are probably struggling with addiction of some sort, and they don't even know that. So it's just, oh, it's a bunch of people do what I do, so it's okay. So it's okay that I work 60 hours a week. I'm not addicted to it. Yeah, until somebody tells you not to, then what, right? So we're all, as a society, we have agreed upon addictions, and we all live within them. And because we're all doing them, we don't realize that we're bound. And we don't realize that maybe we go to our little church on Sunday and we think we're free, but we are nowhere near free. We have a mortgage that we have to continue to pay, a car loan we have to continue to pay, a boat payment that we have to continue to pay. We have school payments that we want our kid in the right. Most people are not ready to be, like my shirt says, radical for Jesus, because we serve two masters, whether we want to face it or not, man. Most people do. And our addictions fall into that. And so for me, I have never really had those worldly addictions, but it was more my insecurities and need to be important on some level because of my own brokenness. So trusting God has been me confronting my own brokenness, my own sinfulness, as an insecure man with severe trauma that I had not dealt with, and recognizing, okay, for me to step into allowing God the Father to really care for my needs, and to really let him worry about all these problems, means dealing with those things, allowing him to deal with those things. But then once that processes began to play out, the freedom that you feel is a freedom that you didn't even know existed, that you thought you were free. It's like, I have this thing where I'm like, most people think they're free, and I can sit down and in 5 minutes of asking them questions prove they're not free. But most people don't want to do that. They'd rather live under the illusion that they're free, right? It's like, I don't want to, I mean, I don't want to confront the fact that I'm beholden to so many earthly desires that I am not free at all. You're not free until the Lord could call you to go do something that makes you walk away from everything other than, your wife and kids, obviously. But, your job, your house, your whatever. Are you free? You're free once you're willing to do whatever you can for the voice of the Lord. And so, yeah, for me, it has been a freeing experience, a healing experience, and a challenging experience, because I had so many personal things that still needed to be confronted within me in order to get there. And so I just highly recommend, man, people, I don't think we sit in the presence of the Lord and really ask him, what am I bound to enough? And I think, that's part of how Brit and myself, with the Uncovery and with the upcoming devotional, want the world to see, man, we're all in recovery. And to really totally walk out that healing and that wholeness and that freedom means confronting every aspect of your life. It means dealing with every single part of your life, because we should be able to hold everything like this, right? Wherever the camera is, right? Like this. But we do it like this. And but it's okay because my neighbor does this, right? My neighbor, it's okay that I want this house. It's okay that I want this car. It's okay. Man, you're making a $700 a month car payment. You think that's okay? You think that's okay?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. And so it's been me really confronting a lot of my own personal desires in my own flesh, and recognizing, like, there is freedom available. Most people aren't willing to take the journey to get there.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good word right there, George. And as you're talking, I think about, with what you've been doing with allowing the Lord to grow you and stretch you in these areas, like, it really takes people being willing to let that happen, right? To be honest with themselves, to be totally vulnerable and transparent, and to allow the Lord to fully examine them. Like the Psalm says that, search me, O God, and know my heart. Well, like you said, I don't think many people actually want that, right? They may say they do, but when it, push comes to shove, it's like, no, whether it's we're in denial, whether it's we just don't want to admit our faults, whether it's we don't want to make changes to our comfortable lifestyle. So many people just close themselves off from that. And like you said, I think that in and of itself can lead to bondage, right? And it may not even seem like bondage, because it may seem like, oh, these are good things. I have a house, I have a car, I have whatever, right? But it's like you said, well, are you truly free? If you're not willing to fully allow the Lord in and speak to you and examine you and stretch you and grow you, is that really free? I would agree with you. It's not. And so I think that says a lot about your heart for the Lord, George, is that, hey, I am willing to just come before the Lord, all my faults exposed, and as painful as it may be, allow the Lord to refine me, to speak to me, to challenge me, and to continue to mold me into the man that he has called me to be. So I just wanted to speak to that, George.
Thank you. I received that. I think it's just, I get, when people are, a lot of times people use the fear example. They'll say, like, I don't know if God called me to live in, this country with all this violence towards Christians, if I would be willing. I don't know if I would. And I understand that, right? I'm like, I don't know if I'm willing to go be beheaded either. I think I would be, to be honest, but I'm not 100% sure. I live in a very violent area in Tampa. I mean, there's people being shot all the time. So, but I get that example. But I think that misdirects people, because then the only example that a Christian has is whether or not they're willing to go live in Iraq or not. instead of saying, are you willing to get rid of your big house and give the money to the poor? Because let me tell you, Terry, Jesus is pretty clear about the poor. And all you Christians listening, man, let me tell you, there's more words in the Bible about the poor than anything else. And so there's a reason Jesus says to the rich young ruler, sell all your things, give it to the poor. Not because people shouldn't have things, but because that rich young ruler wasn't willing to let go of his things. So I'm not saying I'm a proponent of socialism or everything like that. Not at all. I love capitalism. I just haven't very much profited from it. But I do think that there's something to be said. It's about the relationship that you have with your possessions. And so if all you're thinking about is life or death scenarios, oh, I don't want to live in this, predominantly Muslim country. Well, that's okay. I get that. But how about today in where you're at? Are you willing to get rid of some of these things that is causing you to have to emotionally and physically and spiritually exhaust yourself in order to keep them? Because even though I was doing ministry, that's what I was doing. And God slapped me upside the head and said, I don't want you doing that. I've called you to something else. So it doesn't matter if it's ministry or your whatever career you're in. God doesn't want us so physically and mentally and spiritually exhausted that we can't sit in his presence and hear his voice. Nothing should come between him, not ministry and not careers, but often we don't think of it that way. And so we work 60, 70 hours a week. We do it all for the sake of our 401k and our retirement, even though God clearly says, don't worry about those things. Clearly says, don't worry about those things. So I don't know. It's been an awakening for me to really recognize, even though I was tied to ministry, I needed to let some of that stuff go in order to be free.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, thank you for speaking to that, George, and being so candid. Another thing that stands out to me about all that is the concept of obedience. It sounds like the Lord had been telling you, this is what I want you to do. And per what you said, you weren't doing it. And, eventually you did, right? But I've heard the saying that delayed obedience is still disobedience, right? And so what have you been learning, George, about obedience and being obedient to the Lord, when he tells you to do something, to not question it, to, like you said earlier, to not let fear maybe justify not doing it right away. What have you been learning to just go after exactly what the Lord is calling you to do?
To be faster at it. So it's like,
there it is.
I need to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I need to do it in a nutshell. No, I think of, I don't mean this in a prideful way, but I have a pretty, I spend a lot of time with the Lord. And so when I think of those scenarios, I do know people that are like, yeah, I feel like the Lord's telling me something and I just don't want to do it. I'm not one of those people. Like if I have to somehow weed through like what he's telling me. I don't ever like question if I think the Lord's telling me something, I do it. My problem is I often don't hear it somehow, even though I'm in his presence or whatever, but it's somehow muddled within the chaotic nature of the way I think. Like there are people that, and I'm sure you know that, and you might even be one of them that like feels like the Lord's telling me to do this. I just don't know if I can bring myself to do it or not. Like I'm just not one of those people. Like I more or less, if I hear something that direct, I'll do it, but it's more like it gets muddled in there. So I'm trying to get better at, oh, okay, that was a sign from the Lord. Okay, that was him telling me to do something, right? I mean, it's similar to with my wife, and maybe, other marriages can, relate. Our husband or our wife can be, tell us something and we don't hear it. And then they're like, I've been telling you this for weeks and I didn't hear it. Like, it's not, but then there's relationships where the wife and the husband are very clear and they tell their spouse to do something and the spouse is just like, no, right? So you understand it in the human dynamic that there can be times where it's like, no, I just somehow did not pick up on that's what you were saying, even though we've been married for all these years. So it's not like, when a marriage is really in trouble, that's where like the husband or wife are very clear about it. The person receives that and just says no. So there's a difference. And so for me, it's been the nuance. How do I pick up on the nuance of it all? So that I can act faster, right? Act in a better way. And so it's been really great the last couple months because I've been getting better at that in certain areas that matter with my current situation in life, where I think that often, life is like a funnel, or a relationship with God is like a funnel. And all these things are being poured into that funnel, but a funnel goes to a point, right? And so we're trying to take all these things that are happening in our life, that are coming together in our life and are being poured into our life, and have them pour out at the very point. And that very point is exactly what God is saying and doing. And so the mistake that we'll often make is we keep pouring the same things into the funnel, right? Instead of recognizing some of only the stuff that comes out of the funnel is the stuff that I should keep. And so stepping away from the ministry and into a new life was filled also with opportunity and excitement. And I'm a very creative person by nature. And so what do I want to do? It's like the whole world is wide open. I don't have to do this one thing anymore. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And so now these are all like positive things, but it's like, okay, so I'm throwing all these things at the wall to figure out which things stick, right? And the last few months has been a little bit clearer of, okay, I'm going to focus on these things and not all of these things. And so, in the obedience to God in that area has been, results where it's like, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. And then there's a result from God for that. Not like a prosperity gospel type of thing, but just to him letting me know this is the right way. You're on the right path. And so now I'm learning more. Okay, well, I know if it's these things, then don't pick up these other things and continue to try to force them in the funnel, because they're not going to come out the other end. That's not how that works.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think about, you just kind of spoke to it there too. Like, God rewards obedience, not like you said, not in a prosperity way, not in a like quid pro quo type of way, but just because of his goodness as a father. When we trust him, when we show like that there's no limit to what lengths we'll go to follow him, he rewards that, he honors that. And like you said, you're starting to see that in your own life here, George, in the last couple months, really kind of getting a clearer vision of, hey, this is the main things that God wants you to focus on. And so, you said you went on a little sabbatical there for a few months at the end of last year, going into early this year. And now here you are kind of back out doing ministry. So George, what is it that you have been doing? What is this path that God has called you to?
Yeah. Well, so I live in a unique situation. So for me, I'm never able to stop doing ministry because I live in a community in the inner city of Tampa, Florida. I live with, 14, 15 people roughly revolving, right? So all our people that I've ministered to, I'm more or less the patriarch of the community. And so when, when you're people that have been through very difficult, traumatic lives of addiction and brokenness, life is filled with every single second, every decision we make is either going to get us closer to God or further away from God. And so there's always something happening in the community. And, I live like in an impoverished area. So there's always somebody at my door. So there's always something happening. So to say like, oh, you step away from ministry, some people actually do that. I've never been able to do that because of my condition. And I don't mean that in a negative way or a prideful way. It's just reality. So when I say I went on a sabbatical, I had stepped away from being paid, for one, having a salary, and being directly responsible for that ministry, and no longer had that role. And so I could do whatever I wanted. But it didn't mean that necessarily someone wasn't going to show up at my house with suicidal thoughts, or, somebody needing prayer, or, all of those types of things. So it's sort of, a sabbatical within a ministry at the same time. So, that type of, but it still gave me the ability to do, I could get up in the day and not have the commitment of needing to go check on the 4 houses or check on the people that I was working with. And let me just say this. I mean, on a side note, this is how my life had become. I was, over the last probably 7 years of my life, I was sick every 6 weeks without fail. I mean, whether it was a flu, whether it was COVID, whether it was strep throat, whether it was ulcers, without fail, every 6 weeks of my life for, like, if not longer, at least the last 8 years. Let's just say that I was sick. Stepping away from the ministry, I have not been sick yet this year. I have not been sick since November of last year. I do feel a little bit under the weather today for the first time, but whatever. But honestly, that's like how much stress I had been living under. So being in a situation of a sabbatical, of being able to just find peace of mind and just be able to connect with God for as long as I wanted to connect with God, or watch TV if I just wanted to watch TV, and just relax. And so I spent a lot of time, probably 5 months, doing that, and just really found that, God was leading. I've started working on the 3rd book that has always been in my heart. So I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of blogging, and a lot of content type of stuff. I picked back up on probably 5 months after I went on a sabbatical, and doing podcasts and things like that. But the main thing has been, of course, the Sober Truth Project is, always my platform. But I launched a new platform where I am doing, coaching, consulting, and public speaking, trying to get out there and speak as much as I can about, either preaching or teaching, but just really getting out there and using, my life experiences to share with the world, so they can find a different, type of freedom that they've ever experienced. And then coaching and consulting, I've been working with churches that need help trying to walk through addiction, mental health, or suicide. I also have been doing spiritual formation for people, and I work with churches that have had leaders that have fallen into, moral failure. I help them restore their organization and help them put together an organizational, revamp their system so these types of things don't happen. So working with churches in that area, and then coaching, on a personal level, whether it's life coaching or recovery coaching, obviously, but also spiritual direction coaching, and trying to make sure that my services are available for anyone. But yet at the same time, I do get, trying to get paid for the services that I can get paid for, which I've never done in all my journey. So really launching that platform has been really life-giving for me. And another big thing that's been super life-giving is Brian Simmons, from the author of the Passion Translation Bible, has really came into my life, and him and I have really formed a really close friendship and became like a little bit of a mentor to me. And him and I just started a brand new podcast that will come out next month that is all about the love of the Father, and it's called Tattooed Passion. So tattooed pastor and the author of the Passion Translation Bible. So that's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun just talking about the love of God with Brian Simmons, man. Guy's awesome. He's incredible. So, just really getting out there and trying to use my voice and prepare for the launch of this next book, and really, honestly, just enjoying life for the first time in a long time.
I was gonna say, man, as you were talking, like, I just got this sense of just peace, that you seem like at peace with what you're doing in life now, and maybe for the first time, or definitely for the first time in a long time, but you have such a calmness and a peace to you as you're talking about this, George. How has that affected your mental health? You know, your mental health now compared to a year ago, as you're being obedient to God and you're stepping into what He has for you, what He has called you to do. What change has that made to your mental health?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this is being very vulnerable, but last, September was the first time that I'd consider taking my own life again since I really came to Jesus. I had lost my, I wasn't sure I wanted to go on. And I'm someone who's struggled with suicidal thoughts his whole life. I mean, I'm honest about that in my testimony, but it had gotten to the point where being an person who struggled with addiction or whatever, I didn't want to get high because that wasn't the point, but dying was definitely on the table. And so being so lost that became an option again, really made me wake up and recognize, if I want to live, I have to change. And so my marriage was falling apart. My leadership had seriously fallen off. So mentally, I needed to get right and needed to go back into the war room and recognize the areas of my life that I had not completed the healing journey on, and recognize that I'd been playing Superman for so long and I was not Superman. I was simply an actor playing Superman, and the role had come to an end. And I wasn't able to handle, certain behaviors from other people that I thought I was. And so it has caused me to wake up and say, no, you're not going to treat me like that. That is harmful to me. I'm not going to go down, recognizing the things that I had allowed to become part of the norm to my life that I wasn't going to allow anymore. And so, a big, and honestly, a part of this, and I'm going to say this as best I can, but part of starting, the platform that I started and charging for people, it wasn't about the money, Terry. It was about how I felt when rich people would call and use me. I'm talking people with serious cash, millionaires, and not even think like here I am living off of almost nothing in a very, and I got a leaky roof, and I'm not complaining, but the impact that had on me emotionally and my mental health that suffered from that made me recognize I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to allow people to use me when they don't even need to use me. They're just doing it because I'm allowing it. And it has helped me to see like I am valuable. I am worth something. And there's part of us that are in full-time ministry where when you're in social justice ministry like I am, you tend to think like you got to be super, poor and allow the world to step on you. And I did that for 14 years. I'm not going to do it anymore. And so if a person, and then people that would just take advantage of me and allow that, where, they would, here they got money, they could pay for things, they don't they don't donate for fundraisers, they don't offer anything when they take what they take from you, they take your time, people don't understand, like, I don't just show up, give advice, and walk on. I'm a prayer warrior. If I'm like in this with you, I'm spending time talking to God about you. I'm praying for you. I'm concentrating on what is the Lord saying. I'm worried about you. All of these types of things. It's like dominating my life. So we've entered into a partnership, and I'd allowed so many people to dominate my life, not realizing like this is a partnership. I'm not like a tool for you to pick up, use, and put down when you want, and not even take serious like the things that we're doing. Like if I'm taking your recovery more serious than you are, then there's a problem. And so for my mental health, I'm not going to do that anymore. Right. I'm going to help anybody that I can, but it's got to be equal. Right. And so it's caused me to learn, like, if a person's a millionaire, I'm going to ask them, like, you need to pay me for my services. I'm not asking you to pay me more than what's, right or whatever, but I'm here battling for you. So we're gonna do this, and just for so long, my ministry model has been everything's free and do everything for everyone that you can, because the people I work with are homeless and coming out of addiction. And that group of people I still do that for. But so many people now that I work with, I've literally worked with some of the richest families in America. And like, they have no problem not paying or donating or anything. I don't do that anymore. It's caused me to like reevaluate my own value and my own worth, and for my mental health reason, not because I'm trying to get something, but because mentally you can only, be kicked so many times. And, there's plenty of scriptures that back up, what I'm saying. It's, Paul saying you should be paid for the work that you do. A workman's worth the wages, all that. And finally, I've realized that. And so I don't allow myself to be in abusive, toxic, even relationships where I'm the pastor anymore. Like, not going to do that. And so it's helped me to actually have more self-esteem. And I think that leads to peace. Because I think for the longest time, I'm so worried that there are so many bad Christians out there. There just is so many bad churches out there that take advantage of people, that take and take and take. And I wanted so badly to, I want so badly to not be associated with them. The prosperity gospel, the preachers that are making 6-figure salaries. I don't think certain things are right. And that's just my belief. But I wanted so badly to stay away from that I allowed myself to really get beaten down. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And it's helped me in every area of my life.
Yeah.
It's just given me a different sense of peace.
I love that, man. I love that. It sounds like you've learned how to set boundaries, and boundaries, boundaries teach people how to treat us, right? And so you're saying that, hey, from here on out, no, like when I'm performing a service for you, like I deserve to be paid for it. And like you said, your worth, your value, and man, just what it does to a person's self-esteem. Like when you truly see your value and your worth, in through the lens of Christ, right? How God sees us. And I think so many Christians shy away from that because, we want to be humble and we don't want to be, prideful. And I get that. But at the same time, like, God thinks we're the greatest thing ever, right? Like we're his greatest creation. And so we have to acknowledge that too. Like it's okay to acknowledge we're pretty special. We're pretty valuable. Again, not in a braggadocious, prideful, egotistical way, but just in a way that honors the Father, as our
Absolutely.
creator, right? And so it sounds like you're at that spot, man. And again, thank you for being so candid with the suicidal thoughts. I know last time you were on the show, you talked about that too. And I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you last time, George. I'm glad you're still here because man, look what God has done because you chose to continue on. I mean, look at what he's done, not just the Uncovery, but man, you recently celebrated 17 years of sobriety, which is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations and praise God for that. You were featured, I think it was on your local Fox affiliate, Fox 13 there in Tampa. They did a story on you and the work that you're doing. You were telling me that in October, you're speaking at the Addiction and Faith Conference in Minnesota, which you were a audience member last year. People spoke and prophesied over you and said, you're actually going to be a speaker next year. And dude, you're speaking at it next year, right? Like,
Yeah,
look what,
that's pretty
this year, right? Look what
great.
God has done all just in the last 10, 11, 12 months. And none of this would have been possible if you would have just given up, right? If you would have let
Right.
those suicidal thoughts get the best of you. And so again, George, I'm glad you're here. And man, I am glad that you are coming out with your devotional here, the Uncovery Devotional, Rethinking Recovery One Day at a Time. I have a tremendous opportunity and honor to not only get an advanced copy to read, but also be asked to write an endorsement statement for that. And George, I just wanted to thank you, I guess screen to screen here, but man to man, thank you for that. That legit is one of the greatest honors that I've received in my life, for someone to ask me to write an endorsement for them and for the book that they wrote. I couldn't say yes fast enough. I loved the Uncovery, and now the devotional piece to this, man. I truly believe this is going to be a beacon of light and encouragement and hope on a daily basis for so many people. And hats off to you for being able to write a devotional. I don't know, like for me, writing a devotional seems very intimidating because it's like 365 like unique and distinct, things you got to write about. So tell us a little bit about just the creative process behind that, and what was it like for you to write that devotional, George?
Well, I have to say, I have the greatest partner in the world in Brit Eaton. I can't speak highly enough of her. And she's
Shout out to
you know,
Brit.
she is just amazing, man. We've become so close. Obviously, I mean, we wrote two books together, two very emotional and long and yeah, difficult books. And so we just have a chemistry with one another. And so she has a way to put words, a great grasp of scripture, and I have all this life experience, and we're just able to take the two and put them together. But I do want to make a point to say you're right about the 365 days. And so I just when the publishing house wanted to sign us, they were like, "We'd like you to do two books," and they're like, "We'd like a devotional," and I was like, "Yes, absolutely," and signed the contract and all that. And the next day, it's like, wow, this is a lot of entries, and you start to process like, how do we do 365 entries? And you're like, well, we had 11 months to do it. So we're like, well, we just double up a couple here, but then just write one a day. It does not work that way, because any creative person listening or watching knows that the creative process isn't like that. You're creative in bursts. So you have these moments of creativity. Creativity is not on demand. So you can't say, I will be creative from 8:30 to 9:15 tomorrow to write one devotional. You cannot do that. Well, I can't do that. Britt can't do that. We tried. And so the process went like this. All right, wow, we have 365 days. Dang, could we go back to the publisher and try and talk them into 40? No, I don't think so. Maybe we could do a 6-week thing. Oh, no, that's not going to work either. Listen, we're stuck with it. What do we do? So that was us going back and forth at first. So that's that first part of the process. But then the next part was, I said, give me some time. Let me go before the Lord and let me ask him. And I went before the Lord, and I was just like, God, what do you want me to share with the world about the process of the Uncovery? And so I came up, we kind of came back to Britt and her, and I was like, I think we should break it into sections, topical points. And so we came up with the idea of the months. And I was like, if we do that, then I can go and think through 30 ways that I would say these things. And so we first started with the months, and we kind of did a play on words. It's like the Uncovery, but then we did every word begins with RE. And so it's kind of just, but it's like, resilience and all these different words, that for 12 of them. And then I would go and think through, okay, each day. And it was a cool process. Once we figured out how to do it, made it, you gotta, anybody who wants to think about doing a devotional, you can't just sit down and do 360. You could, I guess, do 300, but it's going to just be random. We needed to put some type of outline together, and it started with the months. Then we thought about what topics within that month, and then I would record what I thought each topic would say. Then Brit would take that and add scripture to it. So we just kind of had almost like an assembly line, if you want to put it that way. But the idea, though, is each month really is an important point about the recovery journey. And in each day, it's an aspect that a person can utilize to understand their recovery better, to recover better, or to support someone in recovery in a better way. Now, we didn't write this book with this in mind, but a good friend of ours, Bill Vanderbush, he also endorsed the book, and he had this idea. And so anybody listening to this podcast, I highly recommend this if it interests you. If you're a public speaker that wants to speak about mental health or addiction in any way, but you don't really know how, this book each day is almost like a 3-point sermon. And we didn't make it for that, but we are going to market it as an option, because it really is. Like, each day you could take and make a 3-point sermon to do a video about, or to do a sermon about, and it would really be educating to the people that follow you or are part of your congregation. So it's a way that you can learn and help educate others about the process of the uncovery.
I love that, man. I love it. And like you said, I love how you broke it into monthly topics. I thought that was such a cool idea and a cool way to do the devotional. And again, man, it's obviously a big challenge, 365 days. That's a big task, but you and Brit did it amazingly. And I'm so excited for people to be able to get their hands on this. And, specifically if you're dealing with addiction, trauma, suicidal thoughts, this is the devotional for you. But really, anyone who's just needing, hope and encouragement in daily doses, pick up this book too, because this book is all about it. This devotional will accomplish just that. George, where can people get the devotional?
Yeah, currently you can actually, no matter what time you see this, it's available. If it's before October 31st, it's available for pre-order on Amazon or shoptheword.com. And then, of course, as of October 31st, it will be available right there on Amazon or shoptheword.com. You can also go to both my website, georgeawood.com, to purchase a copy and learn more about me. And you can also go to the uncoverybook.com to purchase either the Uncovery or the Uncovery Devotional. And also in the last year, I also wrote the Uncovery Small Group Guide, which will help take small groups through. You can also do it on by yourself as just personal level, but it's really a small group guide to give, it's 10 chapters of each, mirroring the book, The Uncovery, giving you more information. And there's also, as a little hidden bonus, there's a devotional, like from the book, The Devotional, there's devotionals throughout the small group guide as well. You can pick that up on Amazon as well currently right now.
Well, and I love that. I'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes so people can find it very easily. Just click and it'll be there. And I love how you did the small group companion piece to that, George, because, man, I think this is my humble opinion, but I think every church, that does small groups, life groups, whatever you want to call them, this should be a staple of it. The Uncovery, this needs to be talked about in the church, and you and Brit do such a good job of laying it out. So again, I'll put all that in the links for you guys to find. And George, you're very active on social media, like you said, really putting out a lot of great content. Where can people follow you on social media?
Sure. Most of my handles I try to keep easy. Tattooed Pastor. So it's like if you go on Facebook, it's George Wood. But if you can go to any of the others, it's Tattooed Pastor or GW. I'm right there on all of them, Instagram, TikTok, and X. I got it right. It's called X now,
Right?
right? Yeah. I can't
Yeah,
get
yeah,
used to
that's
that.
gonna take a while to get used to. Yeah,
Yeah.
not calling it Twitter. It's X now. And I'll make sure to
Yeah.
link all those as well. George is a great follow, especially TikTok. You do a great job with your TikToks, George. I know you got to get running to your next meeting here, man, but
Oh, one
this
other
has been
thing.
such a pleasure. What's
Oh, let
that?
me get one other thing. One other thing, though, I forgot the big one. You can also go to George Wood Sober Truth on YouTube and follow, all my either the YouTube podcast or other content that's on the YouTube station as well.
Awesome. Love that. Love to see the impact you're making, George. God is using you, man, and I'm not just saying that to blow smoke. It's very obvious God is using you in the contents that you're creating to inspire hope, to transform culture, and to just let people in on a greater level of the love that Jesus has for them. So keep doing what you're doing, man. This has been so cool being able to catch up with you. I know you got to get going to your next meeting here, but brother, I love you, and I'm hoping that we can link up soon here in Minnesota. And
Yeah.
man, just God bless you and all the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And let me just also, I want to affirm you as well, my brother. Like, knowing your podcast had just came out when I was on last year, watching you over the year, man, you're like killing it, bro. You're like slaying it. It's like I'm like you had the chick from the WWE, and I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. So there's a little side note. So
Oh,
I was
really?
like, oh yeah, you had Lillian Garcia on, man. I was like, what? Come
Yep.
on, man. How do you end up getting that as a guest? Anyways, you're slaying it, bro. So just keep it up.
I appreciate that, man. Man, I mean, like you said earlier, when you're obedient to what God has put on your heart, you'll be amazed at the doors that He
Yeah.
opens up for you. So, great chatting
Amen.
with you, man. Be blessed.
You too, brother. And I will see you in Minnesota.